Right, time for a fighter of the card. There were 3 events last month. The first one was a fight night. I'm glad to say that Caceres, who was on the top of the card, didn't win. Well, it was a split decision. Let me... Not sure... where are we? Yes. I was not sure on this one who to give my Fighter of the Card award to originally. Dennis Bermudez won, but his was a decision. Tarls Lights won, but his was a submission. So I think I'm going to give it to him. But it wasn't... it was alright, but it wasn't... There was nothing spectacular. There was another one, wasn't there? I can't remember who it was that surprised me. No, we'll be here all day if I try to remember that one. The next bout, the next card was UFC 202, and my fighter of the card for this is definitely Anthony Johnson, who defeated Glover Teixeira. I think that was very, very quick as well. Donald Cerrone did manage to win. Tim Means managed to win. Cody Garbrandt managed to win, and Lorenz Larkin managed to win. So almost all of my picks on that did very, very well. The main event was the rematch with Conor McGregor and Nathan Diaz, and I'm going to talk about that after I have done the last card, which was very, very recently, and this was Demian Maia and Carlos Condit. And I'm going to give my fighter of the card to Demian Maia, who managed to defeat Carlos Condit. Now, Carlos Condit is a bit like Gilbert Melendez for me. They are outstanding fighters, both of them, but they just have not had the sort of success, I guess, that, you know, they're sort of victims of providence, I suppose, in the negative sense of the word there. So, do I think that Carlos Condit should retire after that? No, I don't. No, I don't. I think that he does very, very well. Certainly not bad enough to think that he, you know, isn't doing very well and ought to just pack it all in. Yes, recently his record would give that impression to somebody who hasn't watched the fights. But, you know, whilst he isn't winning, his fights are very, very entertaining. They're usually spectacular, and I do think that he should carry on, at least for now. Perhaps, you know, if he desperately wants to, retire after the next win, but it would sort of be a bit sad to see him go out like this. Anthony Pettis also won, which I was pleased with. And in that match between Jim Miller and Joe Lozon, it went all the way to decision, and it was a split decision for Jim Miller. As I said, it probably would be, but Joe did very, very well. You know, it was a split decision, so there we are. Now, let's talk about the main event of the UFC 202. This was the rematch between Conor McGregor and Nathan Diaz, and do you know, it ended up being a decision victory for Conor McGregor, but it was very, very, very close. I think it was close enough to say that you could argue it both ways. I do think it was extremely close, which is why I also think it's one of those things where if they had given it to Nathan Diaz, they would be stopping themselves from a third big payday. Do you know, I'm not a conspiracy theorist in that I think that, you know, all the judges in the UFC are bought, they're all being bribed, etc, etc. But I do think in very, very high profile matches, there may be an unwritten, unspoken assumption that if the result is very, very close, is going to be very, very close, that perhaps it should fall into the favour of the institution financially. I don't think that is a big conspiracy at all. I think it's one of those things where you can't say the UFC can control the outcome, but you can say that as where possible they can influence it. I suppose they could make known that what result they would like in an unofficial capacity, and therefore if it's close, it can go their way. They may well be sort of saying that if it's possible to get a stoppage in favour of somebody to go for it. These are private companies and they are not fair. They are not fair in the way that they conduct business, you know, at the best of times. Who they decide to promote, who they decide is going to fight who is given the opportunities. So I don't think it's too much of a conspiracy to say, look, I doubt it goes as far as financial bribery or corruption like that, but I do suspect, strongly suspect, that there is a sort of unwritten agreement, I suppose, that if results are close, they should go the way of the institution's wants. It just seems a logical thing to me. Coupled with that in this case is the fact that so they now have the right for a best of three, and Dana White is saying not yet, absolutely not yet. Now, generally speaking, when you do have a trilogy, it then happens very, very quickly. So you have one, then you have second, then you find people like me complaining that we're going to have to watch it for a third time. But White in this case is saying no, and part of me thinks, you know, he recognises that that was extremely close. Yes, it shows that Conor McGregor has actually done a lot of work since the last fight, and I don't dispute that at all. He does show signs of possibly being able to get it so that he's actually a really good and talented fighter before, or sort of by the time that they decide, you know, to drop him like a hot coal, which they will do eventually, which they would have done if he had been absolutely finished this time. So, you know, I'm not taking it away from him. What I'm saying is, he's a boy in a man's world, and he is rushing to catch up, I suppose, because the institution have forced the issue, you know, and you can't blame him for taking advantage of the opportunities given. And the last fight does show just how much he's improved. I think the other thing is that the scoring is not supposed to be on damage inflicted. You know, Nathan Diaz has been around a long time. He's got a lot of scar tissue, and it bleeds quite a lot when he's in fights. That doesn't necessarily mean he's missing. Sorry, it doesn't necessarily mean he's losing. But it may mean that he looks like he's losing And I think that some of the judges, you know, it may just be that they are, you know, influenced by that when really they shouldn't be. So they've told Conor that he must go back to defend his championship at a lower weight class, or be stripped of that. And you know, there's no way he's going to face the embarrassment of that. However, they have also then offered him possibly a title fight at a different weight class as well. They are making the absolute most of him, and they are, I think this was a sort of gift to the institution. They realise that if they put him into another match straight away with Nathan Diaz, he will probably lose, and therefore they have lost their cash cow. If they say, look, you have the right to a rematch, but before then, if you could just, you know, defend your title, possibly challenge for a different title as well, that's making as much money from him before what they feel is the inevitable. And to me, Conor McGregor hasn't just got to get another decision victory against Nathan Diaz to win the best of three. He's got to finish in an outstanding way as well, because the last match was too close for him to consider it was a victory that righted the earlier, you know, wrong. It's not like that. You know, I still feel, and a lot of people still feel, that Nathan Diaz has actually already won 2 of the last 3. And whilst that's maybe a little too far, too far to say, I do feel that Conor McGregor still has a lot to prove in a 3rd match against Nathan Diaz before we can confidently say that he's not just a poster boy that's been pushed, that he actually has some of the abilities that, you know, everybody is trying to make out, the institution is trying to make out, his smack talk is trying to make out, that he actually has. That if the institution stopped promoting him, he would still be a big draw in his own right. You know, he would still be one of the elite fighters in his own right. So we'll see what happens, but I certainly don't think that it's a conspiracy to suggest that at all. You know, some people have said that it is, but you know, a lot of those people, there are a lot of people who have vested interests in Conor McGregor, and I do find often that the people who are saying that these sort of things are conspiracy theories or whatever, those are the people that support Conor McGregor, so they're naturally going to say that, aren't they? You know, I am one of these people where if Conor McGregor had won absolutely legitimately, I would say, well, fair enough. I don't like him, but fair enough. So, you know, I can't say that I particularly like Nathan Diaz, but I'm just saying that, you know, that this is the way the UFC work, and I've seen this sort of thing time and time again with them pushing a poster boy because of his mouth rather than anything else. So, you know, we shall wait and see what they decide to do with him next. Hopefully it's defend his title rather than fight for a different title. And then we will see what the rematch holds, I guess. But that's the rest of this year and half of next year gone for him. So, you know, there we are.